This was 2 through 3 years ago in India, and my father and I were driving home from a wedding. I don't know how much y'all know about weddings over here, but this was a 3-day event that involved the entirety of 2 middle-of-nowhere-nothing villages. It was a huge deal, and we were the only white people the majority of these folks had ever seen. So, beyond the bride and groom themselves, we were the best guests. This meant near constant attention, no relaxation or any time to ourselves, and sleep came in the form of a concrete slab of a bed with a thin blanket over it, nestled snugly in between apparently every drunk uncle the village could hold, all passionately arguing for hours about something in Hindi. I think it was maybe the music, which also constantly blared from concert-sized speakers through the whole village. It was safe to say by the time we left the wedding we were already extremely sleep-deprived and out of it. This isn't even the fun part, though. Through an odd chain of events that isn't totally related to this story, while driving home on the single-lane road that had traffic in both directions, dodging donkey carts, groups of scooters, and other drivers at about 120 kilometers per hour, 72 miles per hour for us freedom uniters out there, we get in a head-on collision. I remember realizing what was going to happen a few seconds before it did. Closing my eyes, loosening my body, making sure my tongue would be okay, and then bam. The world turned upside down, and then again, and one more time. Our car flipped 4 times, landing upside down in an overgrown field near the spot of the accident. The other car was mostly gone, and what was left of it was still on the road. Glass was everywhere. My dad was unconscious, my lehenga was ripped to shreds, and there were suddenly voices all around me. I remember being extremely confused and dazed. And I hurt. Why did I hurt? Dozens of people had apparently stopped to flip the car back over to help the American tourists out. A few people pulled me out through the left-hand broken window and immediately went back in to help my father on the driver's side. I, extremely confused, exhausted, and scared, most likely concussed, I later found out definitely concussed, wandered over to the road on the other side of the demolished car. I could hear a siren in the distance. An ambulance? Cops? I didn't pay attention. Where were my shoes? Suddenly a man had his arms around my shoulder and was ushering me to an unknown white car a small distance from the wreck. "I will take you to the hospital," he said. I asked where my father was and a few other questions. He mostly ignored me. "He is fine, come on." He pushed me forward, and in a daze I followed, asking about my things, my shoes, my dad. All I had was my phone, which was still in a death grip in my hand. He ignored me. "Do not worry. Hurry, get in the car." I did as I was told, though I remember asking a few more times about my shoes. I was barefoot and limping. I remember being focused on my right foot, how it wouldn't work, basically ignoring the guy guiding me away from the accident and the rest of the people. Why did it hurt so much? And where was my bag? The man urged me forward some more, promising that my things were fine. He had them already. Just get in the car. I was barely paying attention, slowly following. Where was my dad? At that point, I guess the man decided I wasn't moving fast enough. He wrenched my phone from my hand, maneuvered me into the back seat, and slammed the door behind me. He was walking around to the driver's side when an ambulance pulled up. I struggled with the door, saying I'll get into the ambulance instead, that my dad must be there. And where were my things? "No!" He slammed the door again, blocking it this time. "Be quiet." At this point, I started crying and was still confusedly trying to open the locked door, blubbering that I needed my things. He insisted he was helping and to shut up. Shut up, shut up. He rushed around, opened the driver's side door, and was about to get in when I heard an almost roar-like sound erupt to my left. Suddenly, my father was there, bleeding, limping, ignoring the chaos all around us, and angrier than I've ever seen him. "Get my fucking daughter out of your fucking car!" He grabbed the man, who was almost halfway in the vehicle at this point, and threw him onto the ground, unlocked the back door, and rushed around to pull me out. "Dad, where are my shoes? Does he still have my phone?" I obviously asked to thin air, as my father was already back a few feet away, shouting, hands around the man's throat, demanding my phone. With a terrified look, the man pulled it out of his pocket and threw it several feet away, causing my dad to drop him on the pavement in one swift motion and bound after the device. At that point, the man hurriedly climbed into his car and sped away while I made my way to the back of the waiting ambulance, still not really processing what had just happened. My dad materialized on the bench next to me a few seconds later, my cracked phone in hand, and enveloped me in a huge hug while saying how scared he was. The paramedics moving all around us, securing everything and preparing for the drive to the hospital. Everything after that is a story for another time. But to the random Indian man who most likely tried to abduct me from the accident, let's not meet again. I met Lucy for the first time when she fell asleep on my arm on the bus. When she woke up, she gave me a really weird look before shambling off the bus. I figured she was weirded out that I didn't wake her up sooner, so I kicked myself for being a creep and went on with my day. Can't win 'em all. I was thrown for a hell of a loop when her whole friend group was sitting by my usual spot on the bus the next day. Being an awkward teen, I wasn't about to turn down any kind of positive attention. I got to know her friends and ended up on good terms with her before I realized I hadn't asked her name. I'm hard of hearing, so I didn't hear her when she said her name. Lucy, right? Yeah. Lucy and I had your typical high school courting process. That is to say, she was overwhelmingly forward, and after a few weeks I got the hint. As we were getting close, Lucy would fixate on learning about my past heartbreaks and finding out about my personal life. I'm a serial oversharer, so I really didn't mind talking about myself, but she would constantly butt in saying how fucked up things were and that she'd kick my friends' asses for hurting me like that. I was weirded out. Even at 16, I knew that was cringy and I was going through my emo phase. The thing that really bugged me at the time was that she'd ask so much about me, but she would never say anything about herself. It made me feel shitty always venting and never helping her out. During this time, she missed a few days, and I let another girl sit by me since it was an overcrowded bus and I didn't think it mattered. When Lucy came back and saw me with another girl, you'd think she was shot. She just about ran to the seat behind us and started going off. I can't remember what exactly Lucy said, but the other girl never talked to me again after that. Once her rival was gone, Lucy reclaimed her spot next to me and all was sunshine and rainbows. Nobody ever asked to sit in Lucy's spot after that. Lucy always had a crude sense of humor, but after a while things started getting hurtful. She would take jabs at my insecurities, and any time I got upset about it, she would give me shit for not being able to take a joke. These jokes usually stopped just shy of outright insulting me. When Lucy wasn't breaking me down, she was super affectionate. She would sleep on my chest while we rode home on the bus, and she'd even talk about herself from time to time. I don't remember the first time she hit me. It seems like something that would have been burned into my memory, some kind of cinematic moment in my life. Honestly, it all just blended together after a while. I know it started off small though, flicking me and playful slapping. By the end of it, she would elbow me in the ribs for telling a bad joke. It didn't register as anything abusive until she slammed me into a wall while we were walking through the hallway after class. I told her a shitty joke and she shoved me so hard into the wall. She laughed because of the sound I made before shoving me again. People were going through the halls with us, but they didn't do anything. Sometimes I wonder what they thought of me. I didn't dump her after the hallway incident, but I did start standing up for myself. We started getting into a lot of fights after that. Of course, they only ever ended in one of two ways. She was right or it was an honest mistake. I tried to break things off a few times around that time, but every time I did, she had a new sob story that I hadn't heard before that made her actions totally understandable. I let it get in my head that she was some tragic soul and that I could help her. I convinced myself there was something noble about taking the abuse, and nobody I knew tried to step in and stop me. I finally got the nerve to dump her after 3 major things happened within a 3-week span. First, I found out she was taking pictures of me while I wasn't looking and posting them online. The weird thing was that I only found out because she showed me. It felt gross seeing a bunch of nearly identical pictures of me not facing the camera. The way she showed me was worse. She seemed excited, like I'd be happy she invaded my privacy. The second weird thing happened when I tried to wake her on the bus. After about a half hour on my chest not saying anything, I nudged her shoulder since we were at our stop, and she just got up, looked me in the eyes, and told me she wasn't asleep. Combined with the pictures, this seemed really weird to me. She didn't try to be cute or romantic or anything. Just, I pretend to sleep on you sometimes. Like, what the hell? The breaking point came when she was showing off some award she got from school. There was something off about the award. It didn't have her name on it. Oh no, it had a name. It even had a picture of her smiling on it. The problem is, it wasn't addressed to Lucy. You can't imagine what I felt when I found out I didn't know my girlfriend's name. A few days later, we got into our usual fights and I broke things off. Lucy always was the persistent type. She would sit a few rows behind me on the bus and stare at me while I went to my car after getting off the bus. Looking at her wouldn't make her stop. It felt like she wanted me to know she was watching me. One day when she got on the bus, she looked me right in the eyes for a solid 20 seconds while she walked past me to her new seat. I'm pretty sure she was expecting me to say something to her. The next year I graduated and got a retail job. End of story, right? I thought so too. It was the start of Christmas season and I was working cashier that night. Lucy came into the store I was working at. Random chance. It had been a year and a half since we broke up at this point, so I wasn't happy to see her, but surely we could pretend it wasn't weird. She gave me the look the squirrel on Ice Age gives his nuts. She grabbed something from the front and went right into my line. She didn't say a word to me, but she wouldn't break eye contact and she was swaying like an excited toddler. It hurt to look at her. I rang her up silently and waited for her to leave. Then I looked at the other cashier for support and he told me she was giving him weird vibes. I got this really bad gut feeling after she left. Lucy became a regular at our little shop. She would come in and creep out my coworkers, and she never really tried to hide what she was doing. One of the other cashiers mentioned how often she came in and asked her about it when she was checking her out, and she said she was visiting me. She didn't say my name, but she described me. After that, whenever she showed up, someone would make a note of it on the radio. She was usually in one of the areas bordering my workspace. I heard about her a lot more than I saw her, so I think she was hiding from me. She never got banned from the store despite many complaints because the managers were penny-pinching assholes who would sell any one of us out to get sales up. I know Lucy was responsible for at least one resignation from my workplace. Someone who looked like me caught her staring a few times and heard how often she came. After a while, the stress just wasn't worth minimum wage. The last time I saw Lucy at the store was a little over a year ago now. I was hanging out with one of the girls in the back while we were loading up the carts with stuff we had to stock. We were right by the back entrance, so you could see right in from the store proper. I left to put up the stuff in my cart, and when I came back, I saw her. She was standing about 40 feet from the back entrance, still as a statue. I froze when I saw her. I watched her stare into the back for what felt like hours before she suddenly turned and walked briskly away. The girl I was talking to was still in the back when I got back. She was a lot more awkward after that. The girl quit 3 days later, just about crushing my ribs when she hugged me goodbye. She hated her job, so I'd like to think it didn't have anything to do with Lucy, but I don't know. I left the store not too long after that and got a job that didn't involve customer service. That wasn't the last time I saw her, though. Over the summer after taking my new job, I had a mental breakdown. I convinced myself that I was unlovable and that Lucy was the only person I could possibly be with. I left the house without any conceivable plan to find her. With the stars in the sky lit by street lamps, I saw her. She was with another girl. I got so close I could almost touch her before I snapped to my senses. I thought about her stalking me at the store, and I realized I was becoming her. I ran home and cried that night. The last time I saw Lucy was last week. I was walking home from work and decided to stop for dinner. I thought I saw her in line, but convinced myself it was someone else. I ordered and sat down to eat. I was looking out the window while I ate, and she took the table between me and the window I was looking out of. She was with some guy that looked vaguely familiar. Maybe a school friend? She was sitting at an angle, so she was half looking at him, and every few seconds she could look right at me. I know it was her. She changed her hair. It looks an awful lot like mine now. After I finished, I went to the bathroom because I felt sick. After washing my hands, I looked into the mirror and I felt like I could die. It hadn't occurred to me before, but I was wearing my work uniform, complete with the company name on my hat in big letters. She was reading my hat. Lucy hasn't been to my current job yet, but I'm sure she'll turn up eventually. I'm moving soon, so I'm just hoping I'm not here anymore when Lucy turns up. Lucy's been a part of my life for the last 4 years. We dated for 4 months in high school and she keeps turning up. I wasn't a paragon of mental health before I met her, but I feel like she broke me as a person and I'll never forgive her for what she did to me. Since her abuse and her stalking, I've developed serious trust issues, get painfully nervous leaving my house, and people who show interest in me immediately put me on edge. I've tried to date since everything happened, but I just can't. I'm too much work at this point, so I've decided I'll stay single until I can work through my issues. I live in a fairly rural small town in the northeast of England. It's surrounded by countryside and smaller villages. Because of this, there's very little serious crime. Worst that happened that I can remember was a stabbing around 8 years ago, and in more recent years a friend of mine had the shit kicked out of him because he was full of drink and 2 teenagers were looking for a punching bag. He came away with a bunch of bruises, but otherwise he was fine. This is just to give you a sense of the place I live so you can understand the situation a bit better. I live right next to the bad part of town, the part where the majority of the crime happens. There was even one bloke that dumped half a rabbit on the doorstep of a corner shop as a prank. So it's a pretty rough area. The downside to living next to this area is you hear a lot of things during the night. Having lived in a city for 3 years while going to university, I got used to the constant noise, the sirens and traffic. So when I finally returned to the comparatively quiet town, it took me a long time to readjust. Which meant I heard a lot of strange things, and on occasions saw things far stranger. So with my difficulty sleeping after the first few nights, I lie in bed hopelessly trying to sleep. I should explain there are 4 mundane typical noises to hear in this town. The clock bell ringing every quarter hour, teenagers thinking they're cool blasting their music past their bedtime on their way home, teenagers in general being loud, and drunks. Whilst failing to fall asleep, I hear voices. I go to take a look out the window and watch these people walk past. Pretty standard. Next, a drunk shouting about how he's gonna clock someone's head in. And then finally, right before I went to sleep, a random man walking home alone, presumably after having a couple drinks himself. A few days go by with more mundane noises. But then I heard a scream. It sounded like it was coming from a little girl. She sounded upset, like her mom had scolded her for something. I then heard shouting and the screaming continued. Then both sort of trailed off and stopped. I suspected that it was a really tired child whose irresponsible parent had kept them up for too long. It wouldn't be the first time I've heard something like that whilst here. So I continue on, night after night, trying to sleep. Nothing interesting truly starts to happen until a week later. I'm playing Sims 4 at what would be around 1:30 a.m. and I hear a guttural scream that I can't figure out where it's coming from. The sound was either reverberating too bad or it was from the road adjacent, behind the houses in front of my own. Either way, I lost interest when the screaming stopped after several seconds and I couldn't figure out where it's coming from. 2 nights pass. Once again, I'm playing Sims 4 when I hear screaming again. This time much closer. Close enough that I should have been able to see it if it weren't nighttime. We don't have a lot of streetlights on our street, maybe 1 or 2. There's a good 20 meters or so between the streetlights where it's pitch black darkness. I'm looking and trying to see things the best I could, but it was no good. Which brings us to today. I'm climbing into bed and I hear a bike ride past. I take a quick look out the window but don't see any sign of a bike anywhere. But whilst I'm staring out the window, I see a man step out from the darkness in the middle of the road. He looks like he's just walking down the road and I don't think there's an issue. Until he stops in front of my house. I quickly turn off my lamp and hide from sight. The street lamp I mentioned earlier is directly opposite my house, so the light shines directly into my room, so watching from the darkness isn't an option for me. But it heavily silhouettes anyone facing it. As I lean to see if the guy's gone yet, to my horror, I see him at my garden fence and I can only presume he's looking directly at my window. I panic and take cover once again, listening carefully for footsteps that would indicate he had left. After around 5 minutes or so, I hear them. But to my terror, it sounds like they're walking up the steps and into my garden. I'm too scared to look, but after mustering up courage and strategy to keep myself in the dark, I do. He wasn't there. But I know what I heard. 3 footsteps towards the entrance of my front garden, 4 steps up some stairs, and finally 3 steps to the left and onto gravel. And yet he was gone. No sound of gravel or footsteps. I waited a couple more minutes, but I didn't hear any noises from within my house. We have a 1-year-old, very excitable dog called Dana that would bark the roof off of this place if he came through the back, and I would hear him coming through the front because I'm directly above the only 2 entrances, and I would hear him either breaking a window or a door. So I'm sure he's gone. But I don't know why he was here, and I can't help but feel like he may pay the house more visits. Update number 1. I heard footsteps and took a look outside and saw him walking out from beside my house and out of my garden. It looks like he's gone for now. I mentioned what was happening to my parents and they got in touch with the police. My parents believe he may have been casing the place. I'll update if anything else happens. This happened a long time ago when I was younger, and I have a really bad memory. This is just me recounting the memory to the best of my ability and what I was told. I also want to preface by saying that this story takes place somewhere in Indonesia, where it's almost commonplace to have maids in your household. When I was younger, I had a strong relationship with my extended family. To me, it was normal to be close with extended family. And when I mean extended, I don't even know how they're related to me. In particular, I was close with my grandaunt's family, calling her Grandaunt Sheila, whose daughters/in-laws were like my big sisters. Being the eldest child, I liked being babied by them since I was always expected to be the big sister for my little brother. This is important for later. I was maybe 11 years old or younger. Neither my parents or I remember exactly when it happened. I just want to say, as a kid, I loved milk. I still do, though I tend to stick to skim milk now. When I was younger, I had a favorite local brand that had the usual strawberry flavor. The brand was called Ultra Milk. It was always cool that I was drinking something pink. Unbeknownst to my parents, a gift basket had shown up to our doorstep and the maids had taken the gift, thinking it was a present from one of my mom's friends. My parents had even seen the gift basket and didn't think much of it. It was full of fruit, sweets, etc. The usual kind you would send somebody maybe on a special occasion. It should have been weird that there wasn't a special occasion. But another weird part was that usually gift baskets had a card or something to indicate where it had come from. But there was no indication from who it came from. But the maids had overlooked it and my parents didn't notice at the time. They had assumed the head maid had checked it through. She didn't. In the gift basket, there was my favorite tiny carton of favorite milk, even strawberry flavored. I had lessons with a tutor, and oftentimes the maid accompanying me to the lessons would bring me snacks or food since the tutoring would take a few hours. I was at my tutor's house and she was teaching me about the homework I got today. When I got thirsty, I got my carton of milk to take a sip out of it. I was ready to take a sip of the extremely sweet, artificially flavored strawberry milky goodness. But something was wrong. It didn't taste right. I don't remember what it did taste like, but I knew it was wrong. I remember describing to my parents that it felt like I licked the bottom of a foot of a metal framed chair that I had in my room at my desk. It tasted awful. Thinking that maybe it was spoiled. My mom had warned me about drinking spoiled milk and how it could really upset your stomach. I immediately, without swallowing, grabbed some tissues at the table and spat out the mouthful into the tissues and was surprised to see sort of weird metallic beads in it. Like metal, but it was liquid. I have never seen anything like it and I was confused. My tutor was even more confused and horrified that I spat out a strange metallic substance from my mouth. I didn't really understand what was going on, but my tutor asked to take the carton of milk where I had tried to drink from and told me to continue working while she went to investigate. Apparently, my tutor and her head maid went outside and poured a bit more of the milk onto the tissue, and there was more of this weird metal liquid in there. She asked me if I drank any of it, and I told her that maybe I took a small sip and swallowed it before I realized that something bad was in there. After that, my tutor apparently called my mom and told her that I had been possibly poisoned. I went home without finishing my lesson, becoming slightly concerned that maybe something was wrong. I went home and I don't really remember what happened after that. There wasn't a poison center in my country and no emergency services that would really respond. Third world country and all that. So my parents took me to a doctor to have some blood tests. I remember being pulled out of school. My mom wanted me to stay home from school for the next few days, which was great for me. No one told me the severity of the situation, and my mom just told me that she wanted me to chill at home for a while. No school? I get to have fun? No way. So I did. I stayed home and watched Avatar: The Last Airbender on DVD while my parents were fretting over the idea that I might have been poisoned by mercury. The gift basket, which had already been taken apart and stored for eating later, was all reassembled and my parents tried to go to the police with it. But they really couldn't do anything since we literally had no leads on where the gift basket came from since it had no card and the police really couldn't care less about our situation. Again, third world country. I don't really know what happened other than I was pretty cool with staying home and playing. My life at home wasn't perfect. Got some issues with my parents. But they were really nice during this time, so I enjoyed it a lot since I didn't really understand. I think my parents kept a lot of things from me to keep from getting scared. My parents even took me overseas to Singapore, even taking the liquid found in the carton with them in a tin or whatever to show the doctors there, where I got tested some more and didn't seem to have signs of any poisoning. I didn't swallow enough of it. I'm not really sure if it really was mercury. No one ever told me, but at the end of the day, everyone was glad that I didn't drink enough of it to get affected by whatever it was. Now to get into the suspect part. My parents later told me that they had a sneaking suspicion that it was possibly that Grandaunt Sheila who was the one who tried to poison me. I didn't know this at the time, but around that time of the incident, Grandaunt Sheila was found to have stolen gold and jewelry from my parents' stores for years, worth thousands. My parents were furious and wanted to report her to the authorities, but my grandma, her sister, loved her too much and insisted just cutting contact with her. Since then, Grandaunt Sheila had seemed to want to enact vengeance over being caught and has been trying to get back at us. My mom had warned me that I couldn't play with big sisters, Grandaunt Sheila's daughters, anymore since they did something very bad, and to never get into a car with them if they showed up at my school. But it didn't click into my mind until now. Thinking back, Grandaunt Sheila was close enough to me to know that I loved drinking milk, and maybe tried to hurt my family, even if it meant hurting her grandniece. We could never confirm it was her, but Grandaunt Sheila has continued to be a thorn in my family's side for years now, though my parents have learned a lesson and ensure that whenever we receive a gift basket, they have to have a name on it. My grandmother doesn't believe her sister did it though, but my parents firmly believe that she was responsible. But we had no proof other than her horrible character. We've received weird gifts like black seeds and hair that was supposedly some sort of witchcrafting thing. Witchcraft and sorcery is a popular thing in Indonesia, believe it or not. We assumed that this was all from Grandaunt Sheila, who still lived in the same city as us. It only made sense. My parents never brought me Ultra Milk brand again, which I was okay with since that moment spoiled the Ultra Milk brand to me. I was reminded of this story while drinking strawberry milk the other day. Different brand. I'm no longer living in Indonesia. Not even in the same country as Grandaunt Sheila. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you would like to help support the channel, make sure you go check out my Patron page or debate on becoming a member of the channel. Get yourself some cool badges, all that good stuff. I need to stop saying stuff. You can click that join button down by the subscribe button if that's something you'd like to do, or there's a link to my Patreon in the description. I appreciate you all checking out this video, and as of now, I'm probably either getting ready for my trip or I'm already flying out. Regardless, thank you all so much for your support in this crazy time, and I should be back in like a week, and I don't know if you hear that thumping in the background, but that's my cat Tigger opening all the stuff. Did you hear him meow? You sound like Michael Jackson. Alright everybody, I will catch you later. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye. So I'm kind of on a time crunch right now, so I'm not really going to make up a story. But I will give you a quick update on that bunny that I saved for those of you that actually watched the video of me saving the bunny. I saw him again the other day, standing right next to the pool. So I sat there and watched him. And then he decided to jump down on a frog log and try to drink from the pool. And all I could think was, this bunny's got some balls. Either way, there's a picture of the bunny. He ended up hopping away right after that, so all's good. Just figured I'd throw it out there. He laughs in the face of death. Later.